Hello and welcome to the R2 2017 release webinar for the Progress Telerik Developer Tools. My name is John Bristow. I'm a member of the Developer Relations team at Progress. Joining me are my colleagues Ed Charbonneau and Sam Basu. We'll be walking you through the latest features we've introduced in this release. Before we dive in, I'd like to let you know that we'll be answering your questions via Twitter through the Hey Telerik hashtag. Make sure to use this hashtag because it will help us find them. Also, we'll be giving an Amazon Echo to the best question that's asked, so it's in your best interest to ask and to ask often. Speaking of prizes, we'll also be giving away a Parrot Bebop 2 drone to a random attendee of today's webinar. It's our way of thanking you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us. Please note that both prizes are subject to our sweepstake rules. A couple of housekeeping items before we begin. First, everyone should keep an eye open on the wrap-up blog post that we'll be publishing shortly after the conclusion of today's webinar. You'll find this up on the Telerik blog's site, which should be your homepage, and if it's not, please subscribe to the RSS feed or bookmark it. You can find the Telerik blog site at blogs.telerik.com. Another book-worthy site is the Telerik Developer Network. There you'll find articles on topics that are relevant to you. Recently, we've been talking a lot about Angular, Xamarin, XAML, .NET, and a whole host of other things. You can find the Telerik Developer Network, or TDN, at developer.telerik.com. And now on to the main part of our webinar. The Progress Telerik Developer Tools is the most complete .NET toolbox for web, mobile, and desktop development. Its portfolio features a huge selection of products, including UI controls and tools to help you build applications that are both beautiful and robust. These controls also come with world-class support through online forums, phone and remote web assistance, and much more. Our latest release of Developer Tools is full of great new features and enhancements. It's all part of our long-standing commitment to delivering innovation throughout the year. This is our R2 2017 release, and there's a lot of awesome stuff that we've added. Let's kick things off with Ed Charbonneau, who will show us the latest features in our web UI suite of controls that target ASP.NET and HTML5.
All right, everybody, now it's time where I get to talk about all things web. Telerik web UIs consist of over 70 plus controls, all powered by Kendo UI. Kendo UI provides feature-rich UIs rendered with semantic HTML, CSS, and JavaScript for modern applications that work seamlessly across any screen size, thanks to responsive and adaptive rendering. And you also get full control over the user experience with our robust APIs. Now, in the next few minutes, I'm going to talk about Kendo UI, UI for ASP.NET Core, UI for ASP.NET MVC, and UI for ASP.NET AJAX. So if you're a .NET developer, listen up, because we got some cool things coming your way. First up, though, I have a huge announcement for Kendo UI. We're proud to release this new edition of our Telerik brand of tools, Kendo UI for Angular. Kendo UI for Angular is a ground-up rewrite of our popular Kendo UI framework. Unlike other Angular UI components you'll find on the market today, Kendo UI for Angular has zero dependencies on jQuery. There's so much to talk about with Kendo UI for Angular, I could literally consume an entire webinar. So instead, I'll let our Angular experts, engineers, and advocates do that for me. We recently covered all of our Angular announcements just a few weeks ago in a webinar dedicated to this release. Just stop by blogs.telerik.com and look for our highlights, which include the link to the entire webinar on YouTube. It's time to talk about my favorite web development stack, ASP.NET. We have some brand new UI controls featuring updates to ignite your inner .NET Ninja. First up is the Date Input Helper. It enables you to enter a date and time with direct input. It provides a separate section for day, month, year, hours, and minutes, and furthermore, you can customize the date and time format. Let's jump over to Visual Studio and take a quick look of how this control works. So I've got a simple ASP.NET Core application loaded. It just has some simple features like the UI for ASP.NET Core dependencies are loaded, and I've got a blank index page here. So right now there's absolutely nothing on the page. To get the new date input box on this page, I'm just going to put a simple HTML helper here, and it's going to be at Kendo date input And then I just need to give that date input a name. So let's go ahead and fire up this application and see what it looks like in the browser. You see when the app loads up, I've got the date input box here. It's the only thing on the page. What's nice about the date input box is if you're working on a project where you're going to have users in finance or in manufacturing and they're entering a lot of dates, this is something that's a lot quicker to navigate than, say, a date picker with a calendar. So what I can do here is just simply enter a month and then use either my spacebar or my arrow keys to move throughout the date input box here. And then I can put the day and over to the year. And you can see when I type those dates in, it just simply fills in the box for me. Now, if I were to hit something on the keyboard that's not a number, like the letter W in this case, you can see we're getting some instant validation there. So this is a really, really simple control to put on your page to enable date entry. So let's go back and look at yet another feature of this date input box. I'm going to erase this here, and we're going to add a date input box using a new feature of ASP.NET Core called a tag helper. So to do that, I need to open up my view imports file, and I need to add the Kendo UI tag helpers reference to this file. And you can see I already have an add tag helper, and this is adding the Microsoft tag helpers. And we need to add our custom ones here. We'll just do an add tag helper. The star indicates all tag helpers that are available in that library, and then we'll just call the Kendo MVC dependency here. And I'll save this, and I'll go back to my index page. And now that I'm in my index page, I can add my tag helper in here. And you can see the syntax is just a little bit different from that HTML helper that we had before. Different yet similar enough we can recognize exactly what's happening here. So if I say kendo-date input and give it a name, we should have the exact same output as before. So back over to our application, and there's our nice simple date input again. Now, the benefit of using that tag helper versus the HTML helper is I can still get nice IntelliSense for not only the C# language, but for HTML and CSS as well. So what I can do in here is if I want to extend that box out a little bit, I can type style equals width. Notice I'm getting IntelliSense here, if I could just spell this correctly. And I'll put 100% here. And when I save this and go back to my browser and refresh, you'll see this box take up the entire width of the page. So back into Visual Studio just one last time, I just want to show one more thing with the date input, and that is formatting, because we have every format available to us in Kendo UI we can use here. If I hit space, you'll see that my IntelliSense comes up for my format property, and I'm just going to go ahead and paste it on in here. And you can see that I've designated a format of year, month, day, hours, minutes, seconds. All those things are available to us. We may not want to use those all in one application. I just wanted to kind of show you that they're there. So if we go back to our app and refresh the page one last time, you can see all of those formattings come up, so we can enter our year in here, and month, day, hours, minutes, and even seconds. So that's our new date input control. Has some really awesome features like custom date formats that I showed you, has globalization, and you can find this new control in Kendo UI, UI for ASP.NET Core, MVC, and there's a very similar control in ASP.NET Ajax called the rad date input. For more information about all of those custom date formattings, see docs.telerik.com and search for globalization. The list box is a new widget that displays a list of items. It allows multiple selection and reorder with transfer between two list boxes. Drag and drop is also fully supported, and you can easily customize the appearance by arranging the buttons in different layouts and changing their text. Let's jump over to Visual Studio and take a look. So I've got a simple ASP.NET Core application here that we're going to use to demo this list box control. Now the first thing I'm going to do is come over to my home controller and just new up a view model. And this is something that I've predefined, but it's really simple, so I'll just paste it in and explain. So I have an employee admin view model. It's got two properties on it. These are both lists of employee. The first one's called employees. The second one is developers. And we're going to use this to sort our developers from our list of employees. If I look at my employee class, you can see it's simple as well. We've just got a first name, a last name, and then full name just concatenates the first and last name together. So back to the index page, let's start building the UI for this. So we'll add a list box to the page, and we'll give this a name of all employees. And then I'm going to bind that data text field to the full name property of my employee. And then I'm going to call bind to, and then I'm going to give it my model and then the employees property for that. So let's go ahead and spin this up and see what it looks like. Okay, so you can see that just by adding those few lines of code to the page, I've bound my list of data to this nice list box here. But right now it doesn't really do anything, so let's add some more features to it. We need a toolbar here so we can manage the list of employees that are in this list box. So back over to Visual Studio, I'm going to paste in my toolbar code right into this list box. So let's tidy this up a little bit and we'll take a look. So we have our toolbar, and then we're positioning that toolbar to the right side of the list box. And then we're just defining what buttons we'd like to see displayed in that toolbar. So we have move up, down, transfer, and remove. Now those will come in handy when we add a second list box to the page here. So back over to the app, we'll refresh, and you can see there's our list of buttons. And when we click on names in the list box, they light up for us. So we can do things like delete users if we want to. We can sort them up and down. We can't really transfer them because we don't have anywhere for them to go yet. So let's go back in and fix up that piece. Let's add a new line here. And we need to add another Kendo UI list box. So we'll just paste that guy in. And this time it'll be named developers. And again, we're going to bind to that full name field and the property on the model called developers. Now let's pull this back up in the app and refresh. And you can see that we have the two list box here. And if I press this button, nothing happens. And there's very good reason for that. And that is because the two list boxes don't know about each other yet. So with one very simple piece of code here, we can make that happen. So let's come back up to the first original list box, and we'll just say connected with. And this is really smart here because it just says connected with developers. And once we say connected with developers, we can come back and see that those two list boxes are connected together. And I can even hit this button here and move everybody over. Maybe the whole team is developers there. So back into Visual Studio, I have just one more list box demo that I want to show. I want to show how easy it is to enable drag and drop on these list boxes. So to do this, I'm going to remove the toolbar, and this is just for the demo. We don't need to remove a toolbar to enable drag and drop. It's just not a lot of screen real estate here, so I'm going to take it out. And then I'm going to remove that connected with property because we're not going to need that anymore because the drag and drop is going to take care of that for us. So let's just paste in a little bit of code again. And I'm going to come in here and say the drop sources for this list box are going to be tied to the developers box. And then on the reverse side, I'm going to say the drop source is all employees. And then on both of these list boxes, we'll set draggable to true. So I'm going to save this out and refresh our page. And now I can come in here and just drag these items right on over. And I can drag them back. So that's how easy it is, just with two simple properties, to set up a connection between two list boxes for drag and drop. So there's plenty of features that I didn't have time to show you for the new list box. Like templates, you can make the list box look and feel exactly how you want to for your application and for your needs. There's also asynchronous functionality to let you save your data and persist it back to your database without refreshing the entire page. And you can see these demos at demos.telerik.com, where we have them all set up in all of your favorite environments for Kendo UI, ASP.NET MVC, ASP.NET Core, and there's also a similar control available in ASP.NET Ajax with the rad list box. We've also updated our upload widget in this release. The upload widget now has a chunk upload feature, so if you have big files like video, audio, or large photos, you can break those files up into chunks and send those over the wire easily. You can also upload entire directories, and we've included an ASP.NET Core tag helper in this release. The new features that we've added are available for all of our UI components, and you'll find similar features in the rad async upload widget for Ajax. Our popular menu widget got updated in this release. If you appreciate responsive web design like I do, then you'll enjoy the new scrolling feature we've added. By enabling the scrolling property on your menu, when you're presenting a long list of menu items on a small screen, your users are able to just smoothly scroll between those items. These features are available for all of our Kendo UI based UIs, and you'll find similar features in the ASP.NET Ajax rad menu. In addition to new controls and feature updates, we've made accessibility enhancements to many of our controls. We enable developers to deliver accessible applications by providing features such as full keyboard support and by adhering to globally recognized accessibility standards. For a detailed explanation about all of our accessibility features of Kendo UI, please visit our documentation section on accessibility.
Great stuff, Ed. Thanks. I'm a huge fan of Bootstrap 4 because I need all the help that I can get when it comes to site design. Up next is Sam, who will walk us through the newest controls that we've added for our mobile UI controls that target Xamarin and UWP.
Now, that was a valiant attempt to lure you towards the modern web, but that's something the hipsters are doing. Now, John is going to come on in a while and he's going to talk all things desktop, but that's again so enterprisey. You and me, the cool kids, we're doing mobile, right? And accept it, you've been waiting for my section. Now, jokes aside, let's talk all things mobile. Again, my name is Sam, and that is my Twitter handle. Alright, so it is 2017, and I think any discussion on mobility should really begin with all the choices we have as developers. Let's discuss some broad strategies. So I think the lowest hanging fruit is still mobile web. There is no reason why your website cannot work nicely on a mobile device, and there are lots of frameworks that help you out, like Twitter Bootstrap or Kendo UI, which we make. Now, on the other flip side is native apps for iOS, Android, and Windows. You possibly get the best possible user experience, being so close to the metal, but as we all know, this is difficult because you are using native IDs and technologies of 3 markedly different platforms. It is difficult for one individual developer to know all of these, and it's harder for enterprises to maintain teams with 3 different skill sets. So now you start thinking about code sharing and how can you have a single code base and have your apps be cross-platform. Now, when you start thinking about making cross-platform mobile apps, your choice of technology comes down to your experiences as a developer. If you are a web guy, the hybrid route using Apache Cordova may be enticing. This is where you get to use HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, web assets essentially that you render over a giant web view that runs on every platform. Now, hybrid apps do get dinged on performance sometimes, so you may actually be looking to make native apps. This might actually surprise you. You could make native cross-platform apps using JavaScript or TypeScript using frameworks like NativeScript. So clearly, if you're a web developer, you have several options to make cross-platform mobile apps. But for you and me, .NET developers, I think the ship has sailed, and the answer is a cross-compiled native solution. We want to be able to write C# and XAML in our favorite IDE and have those apps run everywhere. that is exactly what Xamarin offers out of the box. Now, the whole reason why I brought up this mobile strategy conversation is because we at Progress really do not want to hold back your hands. If you look through the Telerik product suite, we want to equip you with sharp UI controls for all your mobile apps, no matter what be your mobile strategy. So it's more of come as you are. Now, let's talk more about Xamarin. I think with the early 2016 Microsoft acquisition, Xamarin has truly democratized mobile development for the .NET developer. There is lots of innovation and developers love Xamarin, so obviously usage is skyrocketing. Now, I don't have to sell you on the promise of Xamarin. We all know that we get to write C# and XAML to target apps that run on iOS, Android, and UWP. But sometimes we forget that you can also target these peripheral platforms like macOS or smartwatches and smart TVs. Now, we were at Microsoft's Build conference in Seattle 2 weeks back, and there was lots of news around Xamarin. The big one for me was the release of Visual Studio for Mac. Now I can have the same exact Xamarin development experience both on Windows and on Mac. And I can easily hook up my Xamarin apps to cloud services. There is a new Xamarin Live Player for an easier deployment story to your mobile device of choice. And they're starting to talk about the XAML standard. As we know, the XAML that you write for UWP or WPF isn't quite the XAML that you write for Xamarin Forms. So now they're starting to think about unification, so you get to write one abstracted UI layer. There is a lot of innovation going on, and it's a seriously good time to be a Xamarin developer. Alright, so let's talk about the two fundamental ways in which you build Xamarin mobile apps and how we can help you out in each way. So first up is the traditional UI approach. This is what we know as Xamarin iOS and Xamarin Android. This is where you get to write an abstracted C# business layer logic, but you do build the native UIs for each platform separately. Here, Telerik UI for Xamarin will give you wrappers over rich and performant native UI controls that will render for iOS, Android, and Windows. And then we have the Xamarin Forms approach, which is where you have not just a shared business logic layer, but you also share an abstracted UI layer. And sure enough, Telerik UI for Xamarin will get you Xamarin Forms wrappers that render polished UI for iOS, Android, and Windows. Let me tell you this, I'm a big fan of Xamarin Forms because it leads to the maximum code reuse between platforms, and that makes developers happy. So, now let's take a look at what Telerik UI for Xamarin can do for you. R2 2017 is a big release. So we have added a whole bunch of cool new UI controls to UI for Xamarin, but a lot of the good things remain the same. The focus here is on developer productivity. You should not be sweating over UI details like how your list view works or how you're rendering the charts. You should just focus on your app features and let us worry about the performant and the rich UI that your apps need. Now these are native UI controls for iOS, Android, and Windows. And like I mentioned, we have wrappers for Xamarin iOS, Xamarin Android, and Xamarin Forms. With the release of Visual Studio for Mac, now you get to work with Telerik UI for Xamarin seamlessly, no matter be on Windows or on Mac. If you are beginning greenfield projects, we will give you Visual Studio templates that get you a nice starting point with Telerik UI for Xamarin. Or if you already have an existing project, we give you easy integration through a NuGet package. Now, you don't have to take my word for how good the Telerik UI for Xamarin UI controls are. There are sample apps in each respective app store. Go ahead and download and play with the controls on your mobile device and make sure the UI is what your apps need. So you could say that with the R2 2017 release, we are kind of getting back to our roots. Extreme focus on building the best possible .NET UI controls for .NET ninjas like yourself. So we're talking about rich, performant UI controls for all your Xamarin apps. Controls that are truly native, yet rendered once from cross-platform apps. Let's take a look at some of the more popular controls in the Telerik UI for Xamarin suite. I'll point out the ones that are brand new. We obviously have charts, lots and lots of charts. These are native charts that you can easily data bind, and they have support for a variety of axes. They are feature-rich with things like pan and zoom, selections, and tooltip visualizations. And then there is the list view. Now this is not your dad's list view. This is loaded with features like pull to refresh, item reordering, and swipe actions. These are features you really do not want to recreate by hand. It has flexible layout support for tablets and mobile devices, and you can bind the list view to hundreds and thousands of records. It does smart data binding on demand and makes sure the UI is always fluid. Seriously, take a good look at the list view that comes with UI for Xamarin. We have a data form control which gives you a nice mapping between your UI layer and your plain old C# business object. You get read-only or editable elements, and 3 different commit modes with built-in data validations. Next up is a side drawer control, and this is one you will invariably find in all of the apps that I build. This is great for tucking away your app's navigation or any other organizational content behind a slide-out design pattern. You get beautiful transitions and customizable effects for your app. Now, UI for Xamarin has always had a sharp calendar control. Now, this has polished week, month, and year views, but in this release, we are adding a much requested day view. This allows you to kind of have a granular control to show the events that are on a certain day of your user's calendar. And this is for enhanced scheduling functionality. All of the other features of your calendar control stay true. Things like single, multiple, or date range selections, support for appointments, and culture localizations. Now, another set of controls that we are really known for in Telerik UI for Xamarin are the gauges. And we have a variety of radial gauges which are highly customizable in their look and feel and provide deep API access. This release, we are adding a whole bunch of linear gauges, so you can plot those numeric values over a certain range, either horizontally or vertically. This makes it easy for your users to envision where a certain data point lies given a certain numeric range. So next up are 2 brand new controls in UI for Xamarin, the tab view and the segmented UI. These controls replicate some of the most commonly found UI paradigms in professional mobile apps, and your Xamarin apps shouldn't be an exception. The tab view provides a true tabbed UI control inside a single page in your Xamarin app. You get to control the selected and the unselected look of each tab, have templates that control the content of each tab, you can swipe through the tabs, and have complete navigation and item support for each of your tabs. The segmented UI presents a paradigm that you commonly find in iOS apps. It's a simple way to allow the user to switch between one or more contexts, and these contexts are presented in a linear segment format, each with either text or images. So the tab view and the segmented UI are simply navigational and organizational UI components that help you present your content in a delightful manner. Now, as of last release, we have a beautiful autocomplete UI in UI for Xamarin. Please don't make your users suffer by typing on their mobile devices. Do some data binding and provide suggestions and allow single or multiple selections. So next up is a brand new UI control, and this is the busy indicator. It's one of those things that makes you wonder, like, why is this not built in, or how did we survive without it? Well, it's here now. If your app is taking a while to load for the very first time, or if you are fetching some data, please don't let the UI just be non-responsive. It is UX best practice to have immediate feedback for the user whenever your app is doing something of a long-running process. This is where you'll use the busy indicator. You get 8 beautiful busy indicators with built-in animations, and you can bring in your own custom content or write your own custom animations. And finally, we get to another new UI control, the rating control. This is one of those ubiquitous controls that you find in most apps. You might have your users of your app rate movies or maybe sessions at a conference. Everyone needs a rating control. So here it is. The rating control comes with a whole bunch of predefined shapes that should serve most purposes, but you can also extend the shapes if you need to. You get templated support to customize the normal and the selected mode of each of the items in your rating control. And of course, it is developer friendly, so there is a nice data binding and consumption API, so you can use the results of the rating control in your code behind. Alright, so how has been the death by PowerPoint so far? Boring, right? Let's jump out and take a look at some quick demos. Alright, so I am on my Mac today. I'm going to be unapologetically on my Mac, because guess what? It's a beautiful developer machine. Now I'm using a program called the Reflector to actually show you my iPhone. This is my real iPhone and it's interactive. Now remember I told you UI for Xamarin has these beautiful store apps that you can find in the iOS, Android stores. And what better way to show you these new controls in action? Alright, so let me actually launch the Telerik UI for Xamarin sample app and show you some of these new controls. Here is the busy indicator. Let's go into the gallery. Notice the nice animations here. All of these 8 or more controls are actually built in for you. This one here is my favorite one, or maybe it is this one here. Now, if you like what you see in any of these controls, you can always tap on this information icon and it'll show you the code that we're using to actually render those controls. Let's go back, and here's a custom indicator. Remember I told you you can bring in your own custom content and still use the animations. It's pretty nice, right? All right, let's go back and let's look at the calendar. We have talked about the appointments and other calendar features. Let's look at the new day view. This one here kind of gives me a list of all the appointments in a nice time router. So it's very easy for you to use appointments and use like scheduling functionality on the user's calendar. Let's go back and let's look at the new gauges. The radial gauges have been there. Let's look at some of the new the linear gauges. So here's the horizontal gauge. Notice the nice animations. And you can also customize the pointers and how the scale looks like. So let's go back out and we're going to go down and look at the rating control. Here's a restaurant review. You can tap on this, and this one's just using a regular star. Nothing major going on, but remember you can customize the shape and the animations that go with each of the rating controls. Let's go back out. Let's look at the segmented control. This one is kind of a classic iOS look. Here are the segments. This one is using images on top. Notice how I can change the segments and change the context that the user is looking at, or I can use text as you see at the bottom. And then let's go back out here. Let's look at the tab view. This one is pretty fancy. It lets you use tabs that are customizable, and the content itself can be templated. So you can have tabs at the top, or you can have tabs like at the bottom, right? So complete flexibility as to how you render those tabs in your apps. Alright, so out of the app, and now I'm in Visual Studio. This is VS for Mac, and this thing is beautiful. It's a native Mac app for Xamarin, ASP.NET Core, and Azure development. Now I have a solution open here, which is the code for the exact sample app that I just showed you. This one here is a classic Xamarin application. This is my portable class library, and this is my iOS project. I can easily add an Android project to this, and sometimes we don't remember that we can take the exact same Xamarin project solution, move it over to my Visual Studio for Windows, and add the UWP project to it. Now, let's say you have an existing Xamarin solution like this. On any of your projects, you should be able to right-click and say Add NuGet Package. All it takes is one single setting in your NuGet sources to point to the official Telerik NuGet gallery. It's going to ask for your authentication one time, and then it's going to start showing you a list of all the NuGet packages that we maintain. Now you can search for Xamarin, and here is Telerik UI for Xamarin. Select that and one click and boom, all the references that you need to use UI for Xamarin in your app are right there in your project. Let me go ahead and close this, and if I look into my portable class library and my references and from packages, these are all the Telerik references that you need, and now I'm all set in this project to use UI for Xamarin. Now, one other thing that we have done differently in this release is we have kind of broken up these NuGet packages. So if you know exactly the one control that you need, and if you know the references from the documentation, don't get the whole bundle, just get the right references so you can keep your app package size to a minimum. Alright, so let's look at some code here. I have a whole bunch of XAML pages open, which kind of highlight each of these controls in action. This one here is for the busy indicator. Notice the references on the top. That's true for every page. Again, check the docs, make sure you have the right references. And let's scroll all the way down here. This is the rad busy indicator. Now notice here the animation height and the width that controls how big your animation is, and then the animation type. This is where you're choosing one of the several animations that come built in. And then you have this is busy flag. That one flag controls whether the animation is visible or you have actually some content. This one's a demo app, but you can actually have a content section inside the rad busy indicator. So it's sort of like a placeholder control. So you either show the busy indicator or you show actual content, and it's all controlled by that one flag. Pretty simple, right? Alright, so next up here is the segmented UI control. Notice here we have the Telerik input and the rad segmented UI control usage. Now essentially this example doesn't show it, but the rad segmented UI control has an item source property that you essentially set to an array or a collection of strings or images, and then it renders the segments in a linear segmented control. Alright, so moving on, next up, here is a page for the rating control. If you scroll down here, you'll notice that this is the usage of a rad shape rating. Notice how we have item fill, item stroke, and other properties. This one also has a item shape property, which could be set to like a circle or a star or a heart. So that's how you can customize the rating control. And finally, let's take a look at a page that uses a tab view. So here is a page which is rendering a rad tab view. A tab view is essentially a collection of items. So this is the items collection, and each items collection is built up of tab view items. Now each tab view item essentially has a header and it has a content. The content is essentially a placeholder, so you can place whatever you want in it. So that's how you build up an entire page that is a collection of tabs all enclosed within a rad tab view. So this was a quick look at some of the XAML markup that it takes to render these new controls in Telerik UI for Xamarin. There is a lot more you can do with these controls on the code behind. So check out the documentation and make sure you know the full power of each of these controls that you're using in your Xamarin app. Alright, so that was a quick look at some of the new controls that are in Telerik UI for Xamarin. The bottom line is, stop reinventing the wheel when it comes to complex UI for your Xamarin apps. Grab Telerik UI for Xamarin and ship your apps faster. We will continue investing in our UI for Xamarin suite because we think Xamarin is a fantastic way for .NET developers to take their apps cross-platform. Okay, so now let's switch gears and talk about Telerik UI for UWP. Universal Windows Platform is a great solution if you want to build apps from a single codebase and target all Windows devices. That includes phones, tablets, and futuristic devices like the HoloLens or the Surface Hub. So, if you're building UWP apps, once again, don't reinvent the wheel on UI. Telerik UI for UWP is here to help. There are 20 plus really polished UI controls that you can use to light up your apps. Now, the last time we spoke about UWP was during our R1 release, and the timing of it was just before we made a major announcement with Microsoft. So, unless you were living under the rock, you should have heard the news that UI for UWP is now completely open sourced. Yes, it costs exactly $0. It's free for you to use. The source code is out there on GitHub, and you're free to use it to your heart's content to build your dream UWP app. Now, open sourcing UI for UWP is a pretty big deal. If you watched any of the keynotes from Microsoft's Build conference, they used Telerik UWP grids and other controls all over the place. It was pretty fun to watch. Now, this release, in R2 2017, we have a brand new demo app for you, so you can go ahead and play with the UWP controls before you actually use them in your app, and there is now full accessibility support for all UWP controls. So now, back on the topic of build, John Bristow is going to come up next, and he's possibly going to be too humble to mention this, but he did a full session at Build with the Microsoft PM where they talk about building custom XAML controls from scratch. It's great stuff, so give it a watch. So that's it from me. I'm going to leave you with a couple of resources that point you to the product pages for Telerik UI for Xamarin, UWP, and UI for NativeScript if you are building JavaScript native apps. The product pages have links to demos and documentation and all the good stuff. So the bottom line is, no matter what type of mobile app you're using, no matter what be your technology stack, we want to make sure we give you the sharpest possible UI controls so you can light up your apps and ship them faster. Once again, I'm Sam Basu, and it was great having you here. I'll hang around and answer more questions. Thanks to you all for watching, and over to you, John.
Thanks, Sam. I'm especially excited about the new controls we've added to Telerik UI for Xamarin. There's a lot of great things worth checking out here. Let's talk about Telerik UI for WPF. Our suite has over 100 controls that cover everything your apps need, including data management, data visualization, editors, navigation controls, layout, and much more. In this release, we've added a bunch of new features we know you'll love. First up is the CTP release of our new virtual grid control. This control enables users to display an unlimited number of rows and columns of data with outstanding performance in their desktop apps. This is achieved through a set of triggering events. These events will display values in cells every time an operation is needed to be conducted. This allows you to display results in a grid without the need to hold a lot of data in memory. At Progress, we aim to deliver the latest UI and UX technologies, enabling developers to create stunning and beautiful line-of-business applications. In this release, we've extended the customization capabilities of UI for WPF by bringing modern-looking UI to your desktop apps. The material theme provides a more flexible use of grid-based layouts, responsive animations and transitions, as well as enlightened padding and depth effects. Security is a crucial factor for businesses, enterprise, and governments alike. With the new digital signature support in the RAD PDF viewer for UI for WPF, you'll be able to both display and verify documents within your application and make sure that they haven't been tampered with during that process. Additionally, through RAD PDF processing, users can now sign documents with a digital signature as well as verify them. Through support for hierarchical resources, the RAD Schedule View control now enables more flexible scheduling scenarios in your WPF applications. And of course, we've added a whole host of other features for things like locale support and others. Let's jump into a demo to see these features in action. We'll start with the new virtual grid control. Here I am in Visual Studio 2017. As you can see, I've created a simple WPF application. I've also added references for Telerik.Windows Controls, Telerik Windows Controls Virtual Grid, and Telerik Windows Themes Office 2013. In mainwindow.xaml, I've added a declaration for the RAD virtual grid, specifying an initial column count and initial row count. These values are used to set up the virtual grid with a predefined dimension. However, they aren't required. Firing up this application will display a window with the virtual grid displaying values in each cell. As I scroll, these values change and increment. Jumping back to Visual Studio, you may notice that the declaration of the virtual grid is empty. That's because it's populated through event handlers for the header and cell values. This is how the virtual grid is able to perform so well. When header and cell values are needed, the responding event handlers are triggered and the result is displayed dynamically. As you can see, the virtual grid is usable in situations where you want to maintain a low memory footprint by requesting values on the fly. Looking at this application, it looks a little bland. Perhaps we can improve the look and feel by applying a different theme. UI for WPF provides a variety of themes that help you achieve outstanding visual appearance and great user experiences. Let's check out the latest one we've added to the R2 2017 release, Material. First, I'll add the Material Theme DLL to my project, Telerik Windows Themes Material. Next, I need to apply this theme to the virtual grid via the application's merged dictionaries. I'll modify the existing ones to use the Material theme and apply the theme to the virtual grid. Now when I launch the application, you can see the theme has been applied. The other way to do this is to jump into the designer of Visual Studio and click on the Theme button. This integrated dialog allows me to pick the theme I want and apply it across my application. Now let's switch gears and talk a little bit about digital signature support in the PDF viewer for UI for WPF. Here's another simple WPF app I've created. As you can see, I've used the PDF viewer control to display a sample PDF document. Above is the RAD toolbar and signature panel, which we'll use in a second. Jumping into the code, let's comment out these two lines, which will set the document source of the PDF viewer to a PDF document that contains an invalid signature. As you can see, the signature panel denotes this fact when the document is loaded. Going back to Visual Studio, this time I'll load a document with an unknown signature. Again, the signature panel tells the user that this PDF document has a problem. Let's switch gears and talk about Telerik UI for WinForms. UI for WinForms provides a complete set of features and controls featuring over 110 controls to help you develop everything Windows Forms based. UI for WinForms now includes built-in high DPI support. This means that these controls will scale properly in different DPI environments. Through high DPI support, the common problem of bad scaling when your apps run on high-resolution monitors is now eliminated, ensuring your app will ship with higher quality on more systems. Similar to UI for WPF, we've added a new Material theme to UI for WinForms. This adds to the list of 20 themes we provide out of the box. And finally, we've added digital signature support for the RAD PDF viewer to verify that documents haven't been altered. Additionally, users can now sign documents with digital signatures through RAD PDF processing. Let's take a look at these features in the latest release of UI for WinForms. I'll start with a simple WinForms application that loads the PDF viewer. As with our implementation for WPF, the PDF viewer for WinForms also validates PDF document signatures. You'll notice this is the case through the signature bar located at the top of the form. This application was built using the out-of-the-box theme, which is pretty Office-like. Let's change this to use the new Material theme we've added to this release. This can be done in two ways. You can either set the theme name directly or target the application theme name property on the theme resolution service and apply it across your entire app. Of course, there are numerous tools you can use to help perform this action as well. One example is the Configure Project Wizard, which allows you to pick the controls and themes you wish to use. If you wish, you could also use the Visual Style Builder to modify this theme afterwards. You can tweak the changes, then incorporate them as a custom theme. It's important to note that the material theme is a touch-optimized theme. This means that it provides additional features like custom fonts, built-in animations, and shadows. One more thing I'd like to mention is our support for high DPI displays. There are two ways to implement this support. The first is to add an app manifest file to your project. In that manifest file, you can add the following XML. Note that declaring DPI awareness in the app manifest file breaks click once applications. The suggested way to avoid this brings us to the second option, which is only available if your project's target framework targets .NET 4.7 and requires you to have an app manifest and an app config files added to your project. I'd like to take a couple of minutes to bring you up to speed on the latest features we've added to Progress Telerik Reporting, our complete .NET reporting solution for web, mobile, and desktop apps. In the latest release, we've extended integration capabilities to more out-of-the-box technologies. Now our reporting client can use Angular 4 to embed Progress Telerik Reporting. This is a huge win for developers using the latest version of Angular. It's a component that will seamlessly integrate into your existing Angular apps. We've also improved the design time experience for ODBC data sources by providing Query Builder support. Now the report author can conveniently build a data retrieval SQL statement targeting supported ODBC data sources. Let's take a quick look at the new Angular 4-based report viewer. I have a report already set up that contains the report viewer component. I'll use the Angular CLI to process the application and host it on localhost. For those of you who have seen our reporting solution in the past, this will look very familiar. The main difference here being the fact that I'm using the new Angular 4-based report viewer. Jumping back to my project, let's bring up the HTML document that uses our report viewer component. I have a directive here called trviewer with a number of bound properties and events. This viewer is using the remotely hosted reports found up on our demo site. I can specify a number of properties, such as its view and scale modes. Using this component is no different than any other Angular component. For customers looking for the combination of using Angular with a robust reporting solution, I suggest checking out Progress Telerik Reporting. Finally, I wanted to take a moment to introduce you to a new tool we've added. It's called JustAssembly. JustAssembly is a lightweight .NET Assembly diff utility. It quickly decompiles .NET assemblies, including folders, and performs binary code diffs against them. A tool like this is useful in situations you'll likely encounter when building and shipping software. For example, JustAssembly enables you to evaluate all changes made to binaries before shipping them to customers. This lets you check to see if anything has unexpectedly been introduced by a hidden build step or a last-minute change. You can also get a snapshot of the changes made in a new version of a library before they're applied, giving you an opportunity to spot the potential breaking changes. The source code is available up on GitHub. To find out more, please visit telerik.com/justassembly. Well, that about wraps it up. Before I go, I want to let you know that you can install the latest bits by visiting your account page on telerik.com. There you'll find a button to download the Telerik Control Panel. This utility is super useful for staying up to date on the latest bits of all of our UI controls. On behalf of Ed, Sam, and the rest of us at Progress, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to join us here today for today's webinar on the R2 2017 release. See you next time.